I understand that there are mornings when you wake up and ask yourself, why couldn't I remember my neighbor's grandchild's name yesterday? Or, why am I standing here in the kitchen without remembering what I intended to do? Such moments can make your heart beat faster, and a worrying thought creeps in. Could this be a sign of something more serious? I want you to know that these feelings are completely understandable. I have spent many years sitting beside countless patients who have had exactly the same concerns. And the first thing I always tell them is, you are not alone, and more importantly, paying attention to these changes shows that you are taking care of yourself wisely. Today, we will explore together a topic that many people often avoid: brain health as we age. Not to create more anxiety, but to bring understanding, hope, and practical tools so that you can continue to live a meaningful life. Hello, everyone. I have dedicated my entire life to caring for patients like you, those who have accumulated the wisdom of age, but are also facing the challenges that old age brings. There is one thing I have learned over many years. Age brings us priceless gifts, wisdom, experience, and deep insights about life. But it also presents questions that we cannot avoid. One of those questions is about memory and mental sharpness. I know that feeling. You are talking to someone and suddenly a name you have known for many years seems to vanish from your mind. Or you enter a room with a clear purpose, but when you get there, you completely forget what you intended to do. Let me be straight with you. This is not always a sign of something serious. All of us, at every age, experience these blank moments. But what makes us more worried as we age is the fear that this might be the beginning of a journey we don't want to take. So, when do these small glitches become something to be concerned about? When they begin to happen more frequently and affect important things in your day. For instance, when you forget a doctor's appointment despite careful note-taking, or cannot remember an important conversation you just had with your children or grandchildren a few hours ago. Once, one of my patients, Mrs. Mary, 72 years old, came to see me with tears in her eyes. She said, "Doctor, I put my wallet in the refrigerator. I can't remember why I did that. Am I losing my mind?" I understood her fear, and I also understood why it was so frightening, because it represents a loss of control, something we all cherish. There is something particularly heartbreaking when things we used to do naturally suddenly become difficult. I remember another patient, Mr. Robert, a skilled chef for 40 years. He came to see me because he couldn't remember the recipe for a soup he had cooked thousands of times. "Doctor," he said, "I stood in the kitchen like a stranger in my own home." This isn't just about forgetting cooking recipes. It's about losing a part of our identity, the skills that have defined who we are. It might be managing finances. Numbers that you used to handle, like mental math, now leave you feeling confused. Or using familiar devices like phones or computers suddenly becomes complicated. I want you to know, this sense of loss is completely understandable, and you have the right to feel sad or frustrated about it. Language is how we connect with the world, so when words we have used our entire lives suddenly hide themselves, that feeling can be very isolating and frightening. Mrs. Helen, 68 years old, once told me, "Doctor, I know what I want to say. I can see it in my head, but the words seem locked away. I keep saying that thing, that stuff, and feel like a child." Occasional word-finding difficulty is normal, but when it becomes a pattern, when you frequently have to stop mid-sentence, or use words with incorrect meanings, or even create non-existent words, that's when attention is needed. Perhaps the most painful thing is when you realize you are repeating the same story to the same person without remembering you have already told it. That's not just confusion, it's isolation, because you may notice the patient, but worried looks of your loved ones. One of the most frightening things I hear from patients is, "Doctor, I got lost on my way home from the supermarket that I've been going to for 20 years. Disorientation isn't just not knowing directions. It's the feeling that the world around you has changed without warning. You might be in your own home but feel like you're in a strange place. Or you can't recognize what month it is, even though the leaves are changing color right outside your window. Mr. James, 70 years old, once described to me, "It feels like I'm living in a movie where someone keeps changing the scenery without telling me." That's a perfect way to describe the confusion about time and space that many people experience. Have you ever paid attention to how you walk? Probably not, because it's as natural as breathing. But one day you might notice that you are walking slower or looking down at the ground more when walking, or feeling uncertain when stepping downstairs. Mrs. Patricia, 74 years old, told me, "Doctor, I feel like these legs no longer obey me. They seem to belong to someone else." That's not just the weakness of aging. It could be a sign that the brain is having difficulty coordinating the body. Small changes like dropping things more frequently, difficulty buttoning clothes, or handwriting not being as beautiful as before. All of these can be messengers that the body is sending to us. There is something particularly unsettling when the senses we have relied on our entire lives suddenly become unreliable. It's not just needing stronger glasses or adjusting hearing aids. It's when the brain cannot correctly interpret what the eyes see or ears hear. Mr. William told me that he couldn't recognize his grandson's face from a distance, even though his vision was still good. Or Mrs. Ruth said she couldn't hear conversations clearly in noisy restaurants, although she heard fine at home. Another notable thing is loss of smell. Many people don't realize this until they lose interest in eating. "Why don't I like my favorite foods anymore?" is a question I often hear. Sleep used to be a time for the body and mind to rest. But when age and brain health issues appear, even sleep can become a source of worry. You might find yourself waking up multiple times during the night without knowing why. Or conversely, feeling extremely sleepy during the day despite getting enough sleep. I have a patient, Mr. Frank, who said his wife was afraid to sleep in the same bed because he tended to fight with someone in his dreams. These sleep disorders don't just make you tired, they can be early signs of changes in the brain that we need to pay attention to. Perhaps one of the most difficult things I see patients face is when they feel they are losing their own personality. Mrs. Susan, always cheerful and sociable, came to see me because her daughter was worried that she had become very indifferent and withdrawn. "Doctor," she said, "I'm no longer interested in anything. Even playing with my grandchildren, something I used to love most, now feels like a burden." Or conversely, there are those who become easily irritable, anxious, or even unusually suspicious. Mr. David began accusing his wife of hiding things that he had actually placed elsewhere himself. These changes are not your fault. They may be the way the brain responds to changes happening inside. I understand why seeing a doctor about these issues is so frightening. For many years, I have sat with patients who have never admitted, even to themselves, that something is wrong. Denial is a natural protective mechanism. It shields us from truths we are not ready to face. But let me share this. In most cases, knowing the truth, however frightening, is better than living in uncertainty. Because when we know what we are facing, we can begin to take action. Mrs. Margaret, 69 years old, once told me, "Doctor, I have lived with this fear for 2 years, finally coming here and knowing the truth, even though it wasn't the news I wanted to hear, but at least now I can sleep peacefully." When you decide to see a doctor, thorough preparation will make the appointment more effective. I always advise patients to write down specifically what they have observed. Not just, "I forget things," but "I have forgotten my dentist appointment 3 times this past month despite writing it in my calendar." Bring along a trusted family member, not because you cannot take care of yourself, but because 4 eyes see better than 2. And during stressful times, we might forget important questions to ask. Don't hesitate to talk about your fears. "I need to know," not just what is happening, but also how it affects you emotionally. This helps me understand the complete picture. This is precisely when you should consult with a doctor and prepare thoroughly for the first appointment. One of the things I always explain to patients is, before we worry about big diagnoses, we need to ensure that there aren't simpler problems causing the symptoms. You would be surprised to know how many times I have seen dementia symptoms that were actually just vitamin B12 deficiency or side effects from sleeping pills or even undiagnosed depression. Mr. Thomas, 73 years old, came to see me for serious memory loss, but after blood tests, we discovered he had thyroid problems. After treatment, his memory improved significantly. That's why we will perform blood tests, evaluate the medications you are taking, and learn about your sleep, not to delay facing the truth, but to ensure we are finding the right truth. Always consult with your doctor about performing necessary tests to rule out treatable causes. If after all the tests we confirm that you are experiencing dementia or Alzheimer's, I understand that's not news anyone wants to hear. But let me tell you this, knowing early gives you power, the power to plan, to make choices, and to live the best days possible. Mrs. Elizabeth, when diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, told me, "Doctor, now at least I know what I'm fighting against, and I will fight." She lived 5 more meaningful years, traveling with family, writing memoirs, and even joining support groups to help others. There are treatment methods that can help slow the progression. There are strategies to maintain quality of life. And most importantly, there is a community of people who understand and are ready to support you. There is one thing I always tell patients: the brain is like a muscle. If you don't use it, it will weaken. But the wonderful thing is that we can exercise the brain in interesting and meaningful ways. I'm not talking about doing dry math problems or playing boring brain training games. I'm talking about pursuing things that make you feel alive. Mr. Carl, 78 years old, started learning Spanish after being diagnosed with dementia risk. "I always wanted to understand what my grandchildren say when they visit," he explained. 2 years later, he could not only chat with his grandchildren, but also help teach English to new immigrants. Read books about topics that make you curious. Take classes, not because you have to, but because you want to. Write about your memories. Play musical instruments. Do puzzles with grandchildren. Participate in discussions about issues you care about. If I could only advise one thing to protect brain health, it would be, keep your body moving. I have seen miraculous results from this, not just physically but mentally too. Mrs. Rose, 81 years old with early signs of dementia, started attending yoga classes for seniors. "Doctor," she said after 6 months, "I not only feel stronger but also clearer, like someone has cleaned the windows in my head." The wonderful thing is, you don't need to become an athlete. Walking 30 minutes each day can make a big difference. Gardening, dancing, swimming, or even just playing with grandchildren in the park all have value. I have a patient, Mr. Jim, who says, "I can't run marathons like 30 years ago, but I can walk around the lake and feel great." That's exactly the spirit I want you to have. Always consult with your doctor before starting any new exercise program. There's a saying I like: we are what we eat. And this is especially true for the brain. After many years of following patients, I have seen firsthand how changing diet can impact clarity and mood. I'm not talking about strict or complicated diets. Mrs. Anna, 76 years old, once told me, "Doctor, I have lived long enough to know that anything too complicated I won't be able to do." She was absolutely right. Start simple. Add a handful of walnuts to breakfast. Eat salmon instead of red meat a few times a week. Drink green tea instead of soda. Eat more dark green vegetables. They're like vitamins for the brain. Mr. Henry, one of my most beloved patients, started cooking a weekly brain soup with beans, greens, and fish. "It's not only delicious," he said, "but it also makes me feel like I'm taking care of myself. And don't forget to drink enough water." Many times I have seen dementia symptoms improve significantly just by drinking 8 glasses of water daily. There are health conditions that I call the silent enemies of the brain: high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol. They silently damage the tiny blood vessels in the brain without causing obvious symptoms until it's too late. Mrs. Dorothy, 70 years old, had uncontrolled high blood pressure for 10 years. "I feel healthy," she said, "so I didn't think it was important." But when she began having memory problems, we realized that high blood pressure had been silently damaging her brain for many years. The good news is, controlling these conditions is never too late. I have seen amazing improvements in patients who began managing their blood pressure and blood sugar well, even at age 80. The important thing is taking medication correctly. I know it's not fun, but think of it as investing in your own future. And don't hesitate to discuss with your doctor if medications cause side effects. There are always other options. I often tell patients that sleep is like the nighttime cleaning crew for the brain. While we sleep, the brain actually washes away toxins accumulated during the day and consolidates important memories. Mr. Albert, 72 years old, once complained about poor memory. When I asked about sleep, he said, "I only need 4 to 5 hours of sleep. I've always been like that." But when we improved his sleep quality to 7 to 8 hours per night, his memory improved significantly. Create a bedtime ritual. Mrs. Margaret takes a warm bath and reads for 20 minutes before sleep. Mr. Frank listens to gentle classical music. Find something that helps you relax and make it a habit. And about electronic devices, I know this is difficult in today's age, but blue light from TV and phones can actually disrupt sleep. Try turning them off at least 1 hour before bedtime. Perhaps the most important thing I want to share is don't isolate yourself. I have seen too many people who, when they start worrying about memory, withdraw from family and friends. That's a natural reaction. We don't want others to see us not like before. But that's exactly when we need them most. Mrs. Helen once told me, "I stopped going to the book club because I was afraid people would notice I couldn't keep up with the discussion." But when I encouraged her to return and be honest with the group about her challenges, she discovered that they were not only understanding, but also very supportive. Another member even shared that her husband was going through something similar. Seek out people who understand you. Join support groups. Volunteer for something meaningful. Stay in touch with old friends. Call your children and grandchildren. Every connection is a thread that keeps you connected to the world. Mr. David, 75 years old, started teaching reading to children at the local library after being diagnosed with dementia risk. "These children don't care if I forget their names," he said with a smile. "They only care about the story." I want to tell you what I have told thousands of patients. A diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's is not the final sentence in your life story. It's just a new chapter, and you still have the right to write it your way. Mrs. Rose, diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 68, told me, "Doctor, I have 2 choices. Sit there and feel sorry for myself, or live fully in the time I have left." She chose the second path. She traveled to places she had always dreamed of, wrote letters to each grandchild to read in the future, and even started painting, something she had never tried before. There are good days and difficult days. That's normal. The important thing is to focus on what you can still do, not what you can no longer do. One of the greatest gifts that early diagnosis brings is time to plan, to make important decisions while you still can. I advise patients to talk with family about their wishes. Where do you want to be cared for? Who do you trust to make medical decisions when necessary? What activities are most important to you to maintain as long as possible? Mr. William created what he called memory boxes, filled with photos, letters, and recorded stories for the family. "I want to make sure that even when I forget these stories, they still exist," he explained. "This isn't frightening or gloomy. It's about regaining control and ensuring that your voice will be heard." One of the things I have learned is no one should have to face this journey alone. There is an entire community of people who understand what you are going through, both patients and their families. Support groups can be life-changing. I have seen deep friendships form between people who were once complete strangers, but now share a common journey. Mrs. Patricia said, "Finally, I found people who don't look at me with pity when I forget their names." There are also excellent resources, from apps that help track medications to meal delivery services when you can no longer cook. The world has changed a lot, and there are more ways to support older adults than ever before. Don't hesitate to accept help. That's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. I also want to say a few words to the children, grandchildren, and friends of yours who may be listening. Caring for someone you love who is experiencing dementia is one of the most difficult things a person can do. You will feel frustrated, sad, and sometimes angry. Those are normal emotions. You are not superhumans, and you also need care. Seek support for yourself. Join caregiver groups. Accept help from others. And most importantly, remember that the person you love is still there despite the changes. Mrs. Carroll, daughter of one of my patients, said, "I lost the father I used to have, but I still have my father. He's just a little different." As we conclude our conversation today, I want you to remember this. Aging is a privilege that not everyone gets to have. Each day you wake up is a gift, despite the challenges that come with it. The brain issues we have discussed today are real, and they can be frightening, but they do not define you. You are still the stories you have lived, the love you have shared, and the wisdom you have accumulated. There are things we can control and things we cannot. Focus on what can be controlled, caring for your body and mind, maintaining connections with loved ones, seeking help when needed, and living each day with purpose. I have had the honor of accompanying thousands of people on this journey, and I can tell you that humans have an amazing ability to adapt, to find joy even in difficult circumstances, and to continue loving and being loved. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with the process. And remember that, though the journey may be difficult, you don't have to walk alone. If you have any questions about brain health and healthy aging, always consult with your doctor for advice appropriate to your specific condition. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. Take care of yourself, and remember that each new day is an opportunity to live well. Wishing you good days ahead.